Hello, my name is Kerrioth, and today we are going to do a cheeky little range review for the Tyranids. Quite a few of you asked for this one, actually, so I thought we would do this one now, make it the next one. So, we're going to start off with the carnufex. I absolutely love the carnufex. There is no part of this model that I do not like. I don't know what it is about it. It's properly menacing. It's a nice, chunky, beefy boy. And of course you do have a really nice variety of loadouts for it, especially considering that you can make everyone's favourite carnufex, Old One Eye, using this. I also like the fact that they changed that so it's almost like a classification as opposed to being a single character. I know a few people weren't too happy with that change, but I actually quite liked it because it meant you could apply that particular one to anything, really, to any Hive fleet, which is a nice change, I thought, because it does look cool. I love the blown off bit of, what's it called, like chitin over the head that shows a bit of the skull, the empty eye socket. It's a really cool adaptation of the model, and it just looks awesome. Absolutely no complaints about the carnufex. I don't remember exactly how old this sculpt is. I think it is one of the relatively older ones, but it holds up really, really well, I would say. It's one of those ones where, should it ever be replaced, they're going to have to keep it pretty similar, because I think it's just become a bit of a classic at this point. I wouldn't want to see massive changes to these guys, because they look really good as they are. All the different variations, like the Screamer Killer and stuff, they all look good. There's no kind of loadout that doesn't have that kind of menacing feel to it, which I really, really like. Moving on, though, we have the Trigon, which I do like. I like both the Trigon and the Morlock. Out of the two, I have to say, I'm more of a fan of the Morlock than the Trigon. It's obviously same kit, but like different options in there. The Trigon does look threatening. It does look terrifying. This weird kind of rearing up serpentine kind of looking thing. And I do like the head on it, but you just can't beat the horrendous stretched open jaws on the Morlock. You just can't beat them for just outright horror purposes. It just looks terrifying and awful. It's the same reason why the Harpy is so awful. Like the massive gaping mouth with all the stuff coming out of it. It's gross. And again, this is one of those. You just look at it and you're like, I don't want anything to do with that. I will say that in some respects, the claws on the Trigon, I don't know if it's just the posing on the example models. I don't actually have this kit yet. But the claws on the Trigon are positioned in such a way that it's a bit more, I don't know, that it makes the claws look more threatening. I think they might actually be a little bit, I think some of them, the top ones maybe, might be a bit bigger than on the Morlock. I'd be tempted to kind of do that anyway, just because it looks that much more broad and scary looking. But again, it's a really nice kit. It looks really threatening. It looks properly alien and terrifying. The pose, I think, is really good, and I've seen some people do some really interesting stuff with it, where they've kind of reduced the height by making it like burst out of the ground and stuff, which looks really, really cool. It is a cool looking model. Both variations are. But the Morlock just has that awful face that you don't want anything to do with. And the nice touch of you can see that there's like an extra bit of teeth coming out the side there. I like that. I like that extra touch. We also have the Tyrannofex and the Tervigon, which are the same kit again. And both of these have the same, it being the same kit, obviously, the same weird elongated back legs. In terms of sheer just disgusting awful, the Tervigon is right up there because it's got that big bloated distended stomach that is pushing like hormigants out, which is a really cool concept. It's just gross to look at. I think this is easily the most disgusting of Tyranid models by far, because of that awful stomach that opens up at the front. It just looks nasty. It just looks really nasty. And they've got this kind of weird setup, both of these, where you've got the kind of long back legs, but then you have these legs that are almost like, almost in the middle. Like, you can see that it's not all the way at the front, especially on the Tyrannofex, because the Tyrannofex has got the gun out the front of it, where those front sockets, actually, like, leg sockets lead out to the weapon that it's holding, or the weapon that is part of itself, to be more accurate, which make it look really, really weird, but it's not, it's like, it's more otherworldly because of it. Like, the Tervigon has got 6 legs. It has an extra 2 that support it out the front there, where the other one's got the gun, which makes it look creepy and weird, but makes it look more like it's able to move around a bit, like a little bit more easily. You kind of get the idea that it's going to be scuttling along like a spider and then vomit out a load of horrendous, like, starving little monster babies. The Tyrannofex looks more creepy, I would suggest, because it's only got the 4 legs. It looks like it shouldn't be. The back is like super arched. It's only supporting itself like halfway across. It's a really creepy model, really. And there is the other setup as well, which I really like, like those big kind of armor plates on the front legs, which have got like a kind of claw aspect as well. It looks, again, it's a really solid kit. Like, both options for it look really good. It's just the Tervigon's extra gross. Extra gross. Now, we also have the Hive crone and the Harpy, which is, again, same kit, different loadouts. Both of these look pretty similar, in fairness. Pretty similar. They do both, again, look pretty decent. They're also big. They are big, chunky models. One of the things I really like about them is the, almost like the lack of leg. Like, if you look at it, you can't really see any way for this thing to land. It looks like perma airborne. Like, the only way that it's going to land is if it, like, slams down and uses its wings to support itself, which I really like, because again, it just makes it extra alien in a way. It's as though it's made to fly, and that's all it will ever do, which just adds that element of not really understanding how it works. There is a fair bit, when you look at the Tyranid range, there is a fair bit that seems like almost designed to be as when I say as alien as possible. I know that sounds obvious because the Tyranids are aliens, but in a lot of them, there is just no hint of things that would make sense for other creatures. They have things that just wouldn't work for other races at all, and it really adds to the kind of horror aspect of them, like the kind of the great kind of like devourer side of things, where you just can't fathom how some of these things work, but in the best way. And yeah, like the Harpy and the Hive crone are really good examples of those. They're just weird. Speaking of which, the Toxicrene is one of the weirdest ones by far. So the Toxicrene, it's funny because like the Maleceptor, it's got 2 big brains, but it's not that dissimilar, like in setup, to like a mix between like a Tervigon and a carnufex kind of thing. It's got a nice amount of armor plating on the front. You can't really see its eyes, which is fun, and it's got the big brains on the side. But it doesn't look totally like freakishly nightmarish. It's a big armored bug. The Toxicrene though is just like, it's just mental. It's just mad. It's got like the veins coming over the weird like venom sac thing sticking out the side, a bunch of horrendous tentacles whipping about. The face of it is all like kind of Cthulhu-esque. It's a properly like horrible model in the best way. It's just like, you just look at it and go, oh god, there's just too much. There's too much weird going on there. And it's, yeah, like when you compare it to the Maleceptor, it's just the Maleceptor is a bit strange, but okay. But then you get that, and it's just the most horrendous mess of weird whipping tentacle nightmare. Oh, it's so creepy. It's cool as hell, but it's just, ugh. Slightly more so is the Harpy, which I think is easily the most horrifying model. Genuinely the most horrifying model in the Tyranid range by far. I have one which I've tried to make more horrifying by doing things to it, but just the base model is all kinds of awful. It really is. It wasn't enough that they had like a big gaping mouth with a kind of pincer tongue sticking out of it. They had to make it all like fleshy and gribbly, and give the inside of its mouth a bunch of talons that kind of stretch out towards you. It is just awful. It's really horrendous. It looks great. It looks awesome. It's just, you don't want to be anywhere near that in any capacity at all. It's just a hard no. Just don't. If the choice is between, run at that and try and stab it, or shoot yourself, you just shoot yourself. That'll be it. Be like, no, I'm not. Why would I voluntarily fight that thing? Look at it. Little details like the fact it's got 6 eyes. I always think there's 4, and then I remember there's 2 just behind. Like the fact that there's like more eyes than it really needs, and those big kind of like crushing claws on the front. It just progressively gets more awful the more you look, because you notice the big kind of talon tongue first, and then your eye kind of gets drawn in, and then you realise that the inside of the mouth has got all these claws and hooks in it to drag you and pull you in, and then you realise that the mouth itself, there's like 3 other big claws around it, and you finally get over that and think, oh, and he's got massive like crushing claws and ripping talons. Like, it's not just crushing claws on the front, his middle legs also have giant talons on them. There's just no part of this that isn't horrendous. It's such a good model. It really is. I can't get enough of this thing. It's dreadful. It's so good. By contrast, the Exocrine is almost like disappointingly normal, considering it's like the same chassis, so to speak. But it does have a gigantic back cannon, which is always a plus. And the fact the cannon looks like it's got eyes on it, it's like, the little wee baby arms on the front. I'll be honest, if I end up with an Exocrine, I'd be tempted to put the big crushing claws on just for the look of it, because the little baby like talon arms are not quite as imposing as the gigantic flesh cannon on its back. But then again, would that be overkill? Would it be overkill? I mean, obviously you wouldn't be able to use it in game as having big crushing claws, I don't think. Anyway, I can't remember. But yeah, this is one of the sillier ones, I would say, but I like it because of that. Like massive living artillery with this big, ugly carapace covering like the base of this big flesh cannon. That's just becoming very. I'll stop there. That's becoming a bit Slanesh. That, but yeah, the Exocrine is cool. It's just the Harpy is so terrifying that I always find myself preferring the Harpy. But again, it's another kit that, having put it together, it's pretty easy to put together as well, surprisingly so. I mean, I did a lot of messing about with mine, but I expected it to be a nightmare, and it was surprisingly easy, which was nice. So we also have the Hive Guard and the Tyrant Guard. I have to admit, of these two, I kind of prefer the look of the Hive Guard. The Hive Guard are... These, I would argue, are some of the stranger ones. Like, Tyranids are weird overall, but the Hive Guard and the Tyrant Guard are definitely some of the weirder ones, because there is like almost like a humanoid-esque element to them. The faces aren't quite the same, like the jaws and the teeth feel that bit more not Tyranid, almost a bit orc-like in a way. But the carapace like covers the eyes, or at least it just doesn't have eyes on its face, which is weird in and of itself. Is a nice touch. I'm still not entirely sure how they see what they're shooting at, to be honest. I've never quite worked that out, but Yeah, and the guns on these as well are unusual in that they just don't look as like grown. I don't know whether it's because they've been painted a different colour. That might have something to do with it. It might be because they're red rather than the same colour as the rest of the flesh on this thing. But they look more built than organic on the Hive Guard. It's one of the weirder units to look at, I think. I think a lot of it is down to the colour of them, but it's still, yeah, it's a strange look, and it's kind of the same for the Tyrant Guard, although it's a bit less so for them, to be fair. Again, I need to read up on on how they actually like see, because they've got to be able to see somehow, unless they just go off what the Hive Tyrant sees. That could be a possibility. Or unless I'm missing eyes that are relatively easy to explain. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I like the kind of additional kind of growth on the armour that these guys have got. It gives them like a, you know, like those weird birds and stuff you see that have like big crests, or you know, they do like a dance where they fan their feathers out, that kind of thing. It has that sort of vibe to it in a way. It looks very what is the word? It looks like a ritual display kind of deal. And I will say, no matter what weapons you put on them, they all look pretty good. I think the claws look the most threatening to me. The living whips that Tyranids have always look a bit strange, but anything to do like scything claws or like crushing claws, those all look solid. They always look good. They are, yeah. There's something like really otherworldly about the Hive Guard and the Tyrant Guard. They look properly weird, even by the standards of Tyranid. I mind you, I say that we've also got Zoanthropes and venomthropes. I mean, Zoanthropes do look bizarre because they're like floating, or they're like, their little tails are just touching the ground. They got little baby claws out the front, but a massive, gigantic head. But, you know, given that they're like psycho aliens, it does make sense they would have that. The Zoanthropes are, I think, scary because they are so weird. Got these massive heads with bodies that just kind of shrink down into nothing. Gigantic brains that kind of spill out the skull. They're weird looking because they look dangerously intelligent compared to pretty much every other Tyranid. The venomthropes look scary for the same reason that the I've forgotten what it's called. Hang on. No. Where have you gone? I've lost him. Where is he? There he is. The Toxicrene. That's it. Yeah, the Toxicrene and the venomthropes, they have a similar vibe, a similar awful, terrifying whip, like tentacle whip, tentacle face deal going on. They just look gross and just unnecessarily appendagey. They do have some of the best heads though. They do look quality. They're like, yeah, the horrible face tentacles. It's a good look. It's always a good look. Now the Spore and the Tyrannocyte are they're unusual because of sort of what they are. That's a weird sentence, but you get what I mean. The concept of them makes sense, but it's one of those things that I don't know. I've never been a particular fan of how they look. I do like the spore mines and things that come with them. They're gross and weird, but the actual, yeah, I don't know. They just never looked quite right to me. I've never been able to work out why. I've never really been able to nail down why they just don't sort of do anything for me. They're okay. They're fine. They're just, yeah, they're fine. They just don't really grab me in any way. But then again, I mean, I say that, like, the drop pod is just a drop pod. It doesn't, like, it's not an exciting thing. It's not a thing of, like, oh, yeah, look at that drop pod. It's just, oh, yeah, it's a drop pod. I guess it's a similar kind of, a similar thing, where like, the concept of it is a necessary thing, but it's not really that thrilling, and what are you going to do? On the other hand, the Swarm Lord and Hive Tyrant, but, I mean, same kit, and they both look great. The Swarm Lord looks awesome. I love the Swarm Lord. It's one of the first time I saw this model where it's got the, like, actual swords that are part of its hands that it's holding, but they look like they're not actually grown into it. It took me a moment to kind of decide whether I liked it or not, but it's just such a threatening model. It's just such a threatening model. That massive blade sticking out of the head, the four arms, the pose of it, the face, just all of it. It just works exceptionally well. I think it's my favourite model out of the range, just because there is no angle from which it looks bad, and like pretty much every weapons combination looks really good. Like the wings look awesome as well on the Hive Tyrant variant. It's a really good kit as well. Having put mine together, I really liked assembling it. It's quality, but the Swarm Lord just does it for me. The Hive Tyrant's fine, but I don't know. The Swarm Lord is just special. Okay, we also have the Tyranid Warriors, which I do like. They're just, I don't know. They sort of are a bit too reminiscent of the Hive Tyrant for me, but just a bit smaller, and they don't have the weird that like the Tyrant Guard have. They do look decent, but I don't know. I don't know what it is about them. They've just never. Again, it's one of those things where they just not quite ever grab me in the same way that like the carnufex has, or the harpy has, or like the first time you see a Swarm Lord, you'd like, what, that is awesome, what the hell is that? I've just not really ever got that from the Tyranid Warriors. I know they're like a staple and like a classic, but there's just other things in the range that are just so much more interesting to me, you know? I guess similar with the Ravener Brood. Well, I think the Ravener Brood are a bit older. Although, can you build the Ravener Brood out of the Warriors? I don't think you can you? No, I don't think you can. But yeah, it's a similar thing with them. They look fine. A couple of the heads haven't aged great, but they look okay. They look decent. They look decent enough. The Broodlord looks solid. I really like the Broodlord. It's still threatening and scary. I mean, it's a giant gene stealer. Of course, it's threatening and scary. But yeah, the pose is really good. I really like the scenery, like a little bit of scenery that you get with it. I think it's a solid model, that one. Now we're getting on to some of the older stuff here before we get on to the masses of little troops. The Lictor is dated now. It's properly dated. It doesn't look terrible, but it's the age of it is starting to show. The detail isn't quite as good. It's not as clean a sculpt as a lot of the newer stuff. I mean, I say newer. A lot of it is not actually that new anymore. But you know what I mean. It's fallen behind. It's fallen behind quite badly at this point. I think this is a model that really desperately needs a refresh, because it just doesn't, like, going back to the example of the Swarm Lord, it just doesn't hold up to the Swarm Lord at all. In fact, having missed going back to it, same with the Death Leaper. They look okay, but they look dated. They look properly dated now. Both of them could do with a reimagining, or maybe not even like a reimagining, just brought up to standard, brought up to scratch. I believe they're both resin as well, which is never fun to deal with, frankly. I mean, yeah, you look at that, and then you look at that, and it just looks old. Just looks really old, which is a shame because the actual, the concept for the model is absolutely fine, and the quality of it would not have looked out of place when these guys first came out. But that was how long ago now? Both things that deserve a bit of care and attention. Same thing with the Red Terror. I still really like the Red Terror, to be fair. I still really like it. It's a cool model, and I have a lot of nostalgic love for it. A friend of mine had the Red Terror, and it was one of the things that I like. The first time I saw it, I was just like, oh wow, that is amazing, that is awesome. It still has that nostalgia value for me, but it's a similar situation. It's a similar situation to the Lictor and the Death Leaper. It could do with an update. It's just getting on a bit now. Just getting on a bit, could do with a bit of love. And again, same with the Biovore and the Pyrovore. The Pyrovore is not quite as bad. The Biovore is looking rough now. That is looking really rough. It's just not clean. Like, the sculpt just is not clean. It's just not up to standard at all. The Pyrovore is faring a bit better. Not a huge amount. I will say as well, the paint jobs aren't helping that much because, these were obviously painted well after some of this other stuff. Like, those are just flat out better painted than that. There's no two ways about it. They're just better painted. But, again, they're not aging great. A lot of this range has got loads of little bits of fine detail and everything is super defined. That's one of the things that is like properly interesting about the Tyranid range. There's a lot of like definition, and that is lacking on these older sculpts. Lacking quite a bit as well. Now, when it comes to things like troops, your Gene Stealers, again, I think are maybe looking like they're getting on a little bit. They're looking a little bit dated now. They're not terrible, but again, there's just all that like fine detail isn't quite there. But things like the Hormigants and Termagants, they look absolutely fine. I think because they are that much smaller, I think the poses do a lot to keep it not too obvious as to like how old they are, because I'm pretty sure these have been around for quite some time as well now. I don't know if this is exactly the same kit as when I started playing in like 3rd, but I have a suspicion it may well be. But you kind of, I think one of the benefits with these guys is that you have so many of them that you don't look at the individual, you don't look at like the detail on the single model, you just look at like a gang of 50 of them. And as a gang of 50, they look fine. Individually they might not hold up quite as well to some of the newer things, but in a big group, you can't really tell. You can't really tell all that much. And then you've got like the gargoyles, which are cute. They're just cute. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to hear it, but they are. They're cute. They are cute looking models. They're just like the little wee wings, and yeah, the little faces. A lot of them, because they've all got like the tongue out to some degree. It sort of looks like they're grinning in an evil way. I don't know. I've always thought they just look kind of adorable in a weird way. And let's go back to a proper nightmare. Overall, it's a decent range. Some stuff is in desperate need of updating. Like the stuff that's still in resin really needs updating. It needs resculpting. It needs brought up to standard with everything else. The paint jobs in a way aren't helping because they're obviously painted a decent amount of time ago, but they're just not quite up to par when you look at everything else in the range. And even some of the older stuff in the form of the like your Termagants and your Hormigants, your Gargoyles, they are not as finely detailed as some of the bigger stuff, but you can kind of get away with it. You can't really get away with it with like the Lictor and the Death Leaper and the Red Terror, and that they are suffering now. They are suffering kind of badly, but the rest of the range is super solid. The rest of the range is decent. I will say it would be nice to see the range expanded, there being more options for smaller stuff, or even maybe not smaller stuff, but more kind of mid-size. It would be, I think, decent for the Tyranid warriors to maybe get an upgrade as well, to get an update of some kind. Like the Hive Guard and the Tyrant Guard, they are weird and unusual models, but they work because of that. The Tyranid warriors, for some reason, feel a bit dated, but I can't really put my finger on why. I don't think they look particularly bad. It's just, yeah, I think maybe they could do with an update as well. Overall, though, it's a solid range. I do like the Tyranid range. There's a lot of scope for fun colour combinations. There's a lot of scope for kind of build your own creepy monster that, you know, as long as people are happy, you can run as various things. You can do a surprising amount with them. And, yeah, the kits that I've had so far, I've enjoyed putting together. They're pretty solid all round. Let me know what you think of the Tyranids in the comments down below. Do you reckon it's a decent range? Do you reckon it's one that could do with a massive update? Or do you think a lot of the stuff is actually still, you know, perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable, but there are things that really, really need looking at? And if so, what are those things? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that stuff. And there's an affiliate link for Element Games in the description, where if you click it, I get something for sending you that way. It's a nice way to support the channel. And some of it goes to charity at the end of the month. That is a thing you can do if you would like. I leave it in your capable hands. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.